lesser known to the people because they're not in with the people, especially the people that would put them in the positions that they're in. So let us view their different situations. The members of the executive and judiciary departments are few in number and can be personally known to a small part of the people. That's what he's talking about. The latter by the mode of their appointment as well as by the nature and permanency of it are too far removed from the people to share much in their prepossessions. The former are generally the objects of jealousy, and their admiration is always liable to be discolored and rendered unpopular. Oh, is that true today? You seen anybody any more unpopular than Trump in the news? The members of the legislative department, on the other hand, are numerous. They are distributed and dwell among the people at large. Their connections of blood, of friendship, and of acquaintances embrace a great proportion of the most influential part of society. So, in a trial between the legislative and the executive, who would have, among the people, who would have the greater advantage? The legislature, right? In a trial between the legislature and the judicial, who would have the advantage of the people on their side? The legislative, because they dwell among the people, because they come directly from the people. So you'll see your legislature way before you'll meet the president or Justice Thomas, right? Unless you're connected to Hillsdale College or something like that. Yeah, we both met Justice Thomas. So, but yeah, it's a rarity that you're going to see those people. The nature of their public trust implies a personal influence among the people, and that they are most immediately the confidential guardians of the rights of the liberties of the people. With these advantages, it can hardly be supposed that the adverse party would have an equal chance for a favorable issue. It's like Trump being tried in Manhattan, okay? But the legislative party would not only be able to plead their cause most successfully with the people, they would probably be constituted themselves the judges. So what he's saying is, and we'll see this all the time in these arguments for a convention of the states. So you have to have delegates in that convention of the states, right? And so who would be the people that would most likely be voted by the people as delegates? Well, basically the same people that had the influence and the money to get elected as congressmen, right? Part of the legislature. So that's what he's talking about here. The same influence which had gained them an election into the legislature would gain them a seat in the convention. If this should not be the case with all, it would probably be the case with many, and pretty certainly with those leading characters of whom everything depends in such bodies. The convention, in short, would be composed chiefly of men who had been, who actually were, or who expected to be, members of the department whose conduct was arraigned. They would consequently be parties to the very question to be decided by them. What did it say in Federalist 1? Said that it would be wrong for a man to be a party and a judge in a situation. Isn't that what it said? Do we know that to be true? Yeah, we don't in Hillsdale, but everywhere else, yeah, we know that to be true. It might, however, sometimes happen that appeals would be made under circumstances less adverse to the executive and judiciary departments. The usurpations of the legislature might be so flagrant and so sudden as to admit of no specious coloring. See, again, I told you how they spell things different. Coloring. C-O-L-O-U-R-I-N-G. A strong party among themselves might take side with the other branches. the executive power might be in the hands of a peculiar favorite of the people. In such a posture of things, the public decision might be less swayed by prepositions in favor of the legislative party. But still, it could never be expected to turn on the true merits of the question. It would inevitably be connected with the spirit of pre-existing parties or of parties springing out of the question itself. It would be connected with persons of distinguished character and extensive influence in the community. It would be pronounced by the very men who had been agents in or opponents of the measures to which the decision would relate. The passions, therefore, not the reasons of the public, would sit in judgment, but it is the reason of the public alone that ought to control and regulate the government. The passions ought to be controlled and regulated by the government. Now here is a true concept, and this comes all the way from Aristotle. Aristotle says to seek the beautiful, one's reason must control their passion. Because if the passion controls the reason, it leads to destruction. Now this is true. And this is exactly what Madison is interjecting here. He's interjecting Aristotle. But it is the reason of the public alone that ought to control and regulate the government. The passions ought to be controlled and regulated by the government. So we have to govern by reason, and then that regulation of the passion is regulated by reason of the people through their elected government. Does that make sense? And do we see that today? No. What we see today, and it is the destruction of America, is the passion in Washington, D.C. that's controlling the reason. It's the passion in New York City that's controlling the reason. It's the passion within our mainstream media that's controlling the unthinking, right? We found in the last paper that mere declarations in the written Constitution are not sufficient to restrain the several departments within their legal limits. Why? Well, it goes back to an old saying my grandfather used to say, and that is, figures don't lie, but liars can figure, and therein lies the problem. Right? Lawyers are nothing more than wordsmiths. They will get on TV and argue what the definition of is. Right? They want to get rid of Tommy guns, though, argue that to regulate commerce means that we can operate inside the sovereign state. Nope. Not by what our founders said. But in the 20th century, we argued that, and we went, oh, that sounds all right. Yeah, let's do that. So, if you remember in Federalist 24, it said that even religion and morals isn't enough to restrain the people. That's why we need law. Is it not true? If that was true, we would never have had Dred Scott. Because slavery was never an American institution. It was a British institution. And why? Well, because our economy was a colonialist economy that depends on slave labor. Now, a free market economy does not. But this is why in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, slavery was supposed to be over by 1808. But that Congress failed at their job. Have we ever seen Congress fail at their job? No. In my lifetime, it's almost yearly. Right? So Congress failed at their job in 1808. And that's why 1861 came about. But think about it. In a colonialist economy, when a rich plantation owner raised 1,000 bales of cotton, and 500 of them had to go to King George, and he was still a very wealthy man on 500 bales of cotton. What happened after July 2nd, 1776? He didn't have to send 500 bales to England anymore, did he? He didn't have to send 500 bales to the king. And what happened? He became filthy rich. Now, what do we know in 1 Timothy? The love of money is the root of all evil. And even good Christian men that owned plantations in the South, at that point in time, because of the love of money, went to their own Bible, the Word of God, and justified why one man should own another. So even morals and religion weren't enough to restrain the people. That's a true statement. It appears in this that occasional appeals to the people would be neither a proper nor an effectual provision. For that purpose, how far the provisions of a different nature contained in the plan above quoted might be adequate, I do not examine. Some of them are unquestionably founded on sound political principles, and all of them are framed with singular ingenuity and precision. Publius. So again, the 5th article of the Constitution, why is it so arduous? Why is it so hard to change the Constitution? Because we have some certain principles that we have to deal with. First off, passions create faction, and faction is the enemy of all popular government. Correct? Did we learn that from Ted? We also learned tonight that reason needs to control the passion to seek the beautiful. If passion controls the reason, it's destruction. So if the law can change because of certain passions and factions too quickly, then the people are destroyed by their own best intentions. So because faction not only lives within our 3 branches of government, faction also lives within the people. And so thereby, it had to be arduous so that the law didn't change on a whim, so that our Constitution didn't become Darwinian, but that it stayed Newtonian. And this is the argument between progressives and conservatives. Progressives want it to be Darwinian, but the conservatives want it to stay Newtonian, true conservatives, because that's the very meaning of the word conservative, is to conserve the Constitution in its original form. That's conservatism, all right? So this is why the 5th article of the Constitution is so arduous. This is why it's so hard to change the Constitution, because it has to be for great and extraordinary reasons. It can't be just because one faction is a little upset. Now, dealing with the law and working in the law, I see a lot of people get really upset about the red tape and how slow things go. Be good that it does. Be glad that it does. Because when things happen fast, you hang a lot of innocent people before you realize that they were innocent, right? And what does Franklin tell us? It's better that 1,000 guilty go free than for one innocent man to lose his liberty. Because there's no greater evil in this world than for an innocent man to lose his liberty. May God spare Washington, D.C. and what they've done with 1,000 people from J6. So, this is why when Bush brought about the Patriot Act, it violated everything that was good and pure and honest. It violated the principles of the Constitution, and it violated the principles of God. It was immoral and detestable. Period. Any questions, comments, concerns? And remember, criticism, because I worked in a prison 8 years and I raised 3 daughters. I don't have any feelings. You can't hurt them. Okay. If there are none, thank you very much for coming tonight. What we're gonna do next week is, and let me go here real quick. Next week will be Federalist 51. Then the week after that is gonna be one of my most favorite classes, and that's the bounty payments for cod fisheries debate. Don't miss that one. Remember I told you in Federalist 24, there was areas, there was was it 24? Yeah, 24. There's an area there, I told you, remember that when we get to the week after next. Because Madison's going to have to argue exactly what he wrote in the Federalist Papers on the floor of Congress. Because Hamilton backtracked and decided that the General Welfare Clause did give Congress power outside of the enumerated powers granted government. So that's going to be a good one. So everybody be safe on the way home, and we'll see you next week. Oh, remember, turn your phasers back to kill. We come in peace.